32 teams in 32 days. Today, the Cincinnati Bengals. Welcome to a series where we deep dive on every NFL team's offseason from the very beginning, when head coaches are being hired, all the way to present day with preseason happening. Here's a list of videos that we're going to be dropping for 32 straight days from August 1st to September 1st. If you see a team that you're a fan of and that video is coming up, I encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button so you can stay notified when we drop that video on that respective date. Despite the winning record, the 9 wins, and almost making the postseason, it was pretty frustrating to watch in 2024 if you're a Bengals fan, and a lot of that has to do with the coaching staff, mainly defensively, which some major changes happened. Zach Taylor is going into his 7th year as the Bengals head coach, has a 46-52 losing record, but that's because his first 2 years, 2-14, 4-11-1, but in the last 4 years straight, has had a winning season, and we expect nothing less in 2025. His offensive coordinator stays the same, Dan Pitcher. He's been the OC since Brian Callahan left for Tennessee, their head coaching job just last year. But the defensive coordinator is Al Golden. So Lou Anarumo was the DC since Zach Taylor took over in 2019. Has been very well respected around the league. Actually was a head coaching candidate for about a couple years. Not too long ago, but because of the recent performance of the defense, 31st in 2023, 25th in 2024, and honestly, that defense was the main reason why they missed the postseason. In comes in Al Golden, who was the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame in 2024, and out of 134 college football teams, Notre Dame's defense was ranked 11th in yards allowed per game. So they hope that Golden could turn this defense around. They made some big splashes in free agency and the draft on defense, which we're going to get into right now. Looking at the losses, they lost some key pieces in all 3 phases on the defense. Sam Hubbard, he retired. Sheldon Rankins on the defensive line. Then up-end linebackers, Akeem Davis-Gaither, he's with the Cardinals. Jermaine Pratt with Vegas after he was a surprise release for the Bengals. He seemed like he was very reliable for so many years, but after free agency and the draft played out, they felt like they didn't have a need for him, so they released him. He signs with Vegas on a 1-year, $4 million deal, and then Mike Hilton and Von Bell in that secondary. But shifting over to the ads, they kind of canceled out, or tried to at least, those losses as much as possible. Oren Burks with the linebackers, they added him after he had a big game with the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game after he took over for Nakobe Dean, who was injured in that game. Taven Bryan, he's more of a rotational piece we expect because TJ Slayton, coming up from the Green Bay Packers, we expect him to be that starting defensive tackle alongside BJ Hill on that D-line. And then Khalil Herbert, another loss at running back, a veteran running back, but they added a veteran running back to replace him, Samaje Perine, a very familiar face, who was with the Bengals when they had that Super Bowl run. So it's just, you lose some, you gain some. Try to keep the same defense and not regress as much as possible. They actually did make a splash on defense in the NFL draft with the first 2 picks, and Shamar Stewart and Demetrius Knight Jr. Shamar Stewart could be a potential starter in 2025. We don't know because Trey Hendrickson is currently in the middle of a contract dispute after he signed a 1-year, $21 million contract extension in 2023. That last year is this year in 25. There's no guarantee on if he's going to be playing in 25. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But first with Shamar Stewart, he was going through his own contract dispute with the Bengals brass. They finally settled on him signing his 4-year deal, getting his money guaranteed. There was something in his clause or in his contract that the Bengals were proposing where there's any sort of legal issue or any instance like that, the Bengals are not liable to pay him all of his guaranteed money. So it seems like that was the big holdup from what reports are saying. They got all that resolved. Shamar Stewart is going to be a Cincinnati Bengal in 25. And even if Hendrickson plays, Joseph Asai could be competing with Shamar Stewart for that role. If anything, it could also be 50-50 or 33-33-33, because let's not forget Myles Murphy, who was drafted in the 1st round just a few years ago. Demetrius Knight Jr., linebacker from South Carolina. So they already have Logan Wilson up in the middle. Oren Burks, we expect to be one of the outside linebackers in a 4-3 base. And then on the other side, we expect it to be Demetrius Knight. And then the third potential starter that they added in the first 3 rounds is Dylan Fairchild from that stout Georgia offensive line. We talked about Lucas Patrick being an addition in free agency. He could be replacing Alex Kappa. Then that other guard position, is it going to be Fairchild? Is it going to be last year's starter and Cordell Volson? Is it going to be Cody Ford maybe? Let's try to answer those questions as best as possible as we move into projected starters for 2025. With the offense, at quarterback, Joe Burrow, Jake Browning's going to be his backup, and then Desmond Ridder that they added will be the QB3. And then at running back, Chase Brown, who was quite a blessing in 2024 sometime after week 5, week 6. On the running back 2 to kind of work in a little bit more, and it's not just going to be the Chase Brown show as it was in 2024. Actually, back in April, Zach Taylor said that they are looking to reduce Brown's carries. They do expect him to be the starter, and when we get to projected stats, we still expect Brown to have a very good season. Moving into wide receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, as solid as ever, so glad that they got those contract extensions done. And then that wide receiver 3 spot in the slot, you can call it the Tyler Boyd role, the Andre Yosivas that was in that role last year. We have a Yoshi right now starting as that slot receiver. However, be aware of Jermaine Burton. Burton has all the makings to be a superstar wide receiver. He played at Alabama. His specialty is playing on the outside. However, he fell in the NFL draft last year because of some character issues that unfortunately carried on over to the Cincinnati Bengals. Last year, it affected the team, affected his playing time. But even with that, he's still dealing with some criticism. Right now, he has an undisclosed injury, but people are saying, oh, this is just a cover-up and not letting him play in preseason because of his character issues. And I don't think that's true. We'll see how that wide receiver 3 spot shakes up in 2025. But over to tight end, Mike Gesicki is still going to be the starting tight end, even though they added in Noah Fant. People are saying with Fant's addition, Gesicki's targets are going to go down. I wouldn't say that's necessarily true. I don't think Noah Fant necessarily affects Mike Gesicki and how many targets he's going to get. It's more so the health of T. Higgins, because last year when Higgins was hurt, Gesicki's targets got an uptick. And this tight end room also, they split their snaps. It's not like Gesicki's going to get 75-80% of the snaps every game. It's more so dependent on personnel, formation. So something like a 12 where you need a tight end like Drew Sample to line up alongside the O-line to run block. That's where Gesicki is not going to be on the field. However, if you're more of a passing situation, you need a vertical threat tight end, that's where Gesicki is going to be present. We'll talk about Gesicki's stat line a little bit later on when we get to projected stats. But moving on to that offensive line, the revamped O-line at the guard position. So at tackle, Amarius Mims, that monster that they drafted last year in the first round, he's going to be the starting tackle alongside Orlando Brown Jr., Ted Karras up the middle, as solid as ever. Lucas Patrick, that free agent addition, right now we have him as that replacement for Alex Kappa at right guard. And then Dylan Fairchild, the third-round rookie we expect to be that starter. Like I mentioned, Cordell Volson, Cody Ford, those two guys could be battling it out with Fairchild. But right now, we're going to give the nod to the rookie. And then to the projected starters for defense, we talked about that D-line. Trey Hendrickson, we don't know his status. I will say, at that preseason game that they had against the Eagles, they desperately need Trey Hendrickson. I think he averaged almost 5 pressures a game last year. And then in that game against the Eagles, they only had 16 quarterback pressures and 2 sacks. So they are missing that presence of Hendrickson if he doesn't play. Then to the linebackers, Demetrius Knight Jr., opposite of Oren Burks. 2 new additions. Burks was a rotational piece for the Eagles. Now we expect him to be a starter. And then Logan Wilson up in the middle, as solid as ever. Then to that secondary, Cam Taylor-Britt and DJ Turner II, we expect to be the outside corners. Dax Hill, we expect to be the second string for both of those positions, both of those corners. But he's more so a nickel back, so he'll be utilized when there's 5 or more defensive backs on the field. And then at safety, Geno Stone, their acquisition from Baltimore a couple years ago, and then Jordan Battle will be starting at safety. Over to special teams, no changes here actually at all. Cal Adamitis is the long snapper, still the long snapper after he re-signed with the Bengals this offseason. Evan McPherson, Money McPherson, Ryan Recco, and then Charlie Jones as the returner. Now to get into projected stats for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Let's say last year was the ceiling for Joe Burrow because we haven't seen a better season out of him. And let's find a good in-between of his ceiling and his floor. Let's bring him down to earth just a little bit. And down to earth is still a very solid season. 4,600 yards passing as opposed to the 4,900 that he passed last year. 37 touchdowns to 11 interceptions as opposed to the 43 to 9 TD to interception ratio that he had. Is he capable of throwing over 40 touchdowns again this year? Absolutely. But let's bring him down to earth, like I said, and find a good in-between. Over to running backs, Chase Brown, we expect him to be the RB1, get the bulk of carries. However, as we mentioned earlier in the video, Zach Taylor wants to reduce the amount of wear and tear on Brown and keep him fresh throughout the season. And because of that, we went from 298 carries is what he was projected to put up if he was playing all 17 games as the RB1. We brought him down to 255. So still a very solid season, very well involved in that offense. But last year, he was averaging 17.5 carries per game as a starter. This year, it might be closer to 14.5. So still very solid, over 1,000 yards rushing, 7 rushing touchdowns, and then being utilized in the pass game, 56 receptions on 67 targets, 400 yards receiving, and then 4 receiving touchdowns. But expect Samaje Perine to get a little bit of run in there and get his fair share of carries. Wide receivers, we just want to talk about the top 2 guys. If you want stats on the wide receiver 3, whether it's Yoshi Voss or Jermaine Burton, as we mentioned earlier in the video, they get around 60 targets, 6 receiving touchdowns. At least that was Yoshi Voss's role last year. But the main attention is going to be on the top 2 guys. Jamar Chase, another solid season, double-digit touchdowns, almost 1,500 yards receiving, 119 receptions on 172 targets. Actually, the most targeted receiver in our projections throughout the NFL. Then T. Higgins, the 1B, as Jamar Chase likes to call him, 125 targets, 80 receptions, 1,026 receiving yards, and 9 receiving touchdowns is what we project for the wide receivers. And then at tight ends, again, we could put multiple tight ends. You could put in Noah Fant. You could put in Drew Sample. So last year, he had 83 targets, and that was because of T. Higgins and the injuries that he's been dealing with. He had an uptick in targets. If Higgins stays healthy this year, even with Fant's addition, you could still expect somewhere around 70 to 75 targets for Gesicki. And what we have is 57 receptions, 581 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. But those are our projected stats for the Cincinnati Bengals offense. And to wrap up the video, we want to talk about projected record. So we don't just give you one record and say that anything outside of that is wrong. I like to give it a floor and a ceiling. Minimum, the Bengals are going to win this many games, and maximum, this many. And Bengals fans, you'll be pleased. If we put up the graphic, the floor for them is 9-8, and the ceiling is 14-3. The reason why I have this is because the floor, what I expect the absolute worst for the Bengals to do is to have a season that was very similar to last year. Last year, in my opinion, was the absolute worst that the Bengals could have done, given the roster and the talent that they had, given the poor performances by that defense. This year, I mean, it would be a freak accident if that were to happen again. They expect to be better. They learned from their mistakes. They got a new defensive coordinator. They got some new pieces throughout the draft and the offseason and the free agency. So we expect them to be better. So 9-8 is the absolute worst. What I expect is 11-6. That won't win the division because if you watched the Ravens video, we have the Ravens going 14-3, winning the division. But if they reach their ceiling of 14-3, could they win the division? Absolutely. I think that they could split with the Ravens. I don't believe that they could sweep them. But if they were to have a tiebreaker over the Ravens at 14-3, they win the division. Regardless, what I expect for them is to make the postseason, and they are very capable with that offense, going even further beyond the wild card, beyond the divisional, and dare I say, beyond the conference championship. But that's my opinion of the 2025 Cincinnati Bengals. If you agree or disagree with anything, leave a comment down below. I'd love to interact with the guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay notified when we come up with more deep dives just like this. 32 deep dives in 32 days throughout the month of August. Tomorrow, the Green Bay Packers, drafting their first round wide receiver in a very long time. How's it going to shake up for the Green Bay Packers? Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow.